I reluctantly left my in-laws' place, dreading the fact that I had to visit the person I really didn't want to see, my mother-in-law. She's the mother of my beloved spouse, but I just don't get along with her. As soon as we got to my in-laws' house, my daughter started crying, maybe sensing my discomfort. The more I tried to calm her down, the louder she wailed, almost as if she could feel my frustration. Then, unexpectedly, my nephew, the son of my brother-in-law, piped up. "Do you know why the baby's crying?" When my brother-in-law asked him, my nephew confidently replied, "Yes." Little did anyone know, that answer would later alter my destiny. My name's Willow, 29 years old. Ken and I have been married for 2 years, and we clicked from the start. We're more like best friends than anything else. Ken's mom, however, isn't a fan of our bond. She's made clear, not directly, but through her actions, that she's not fond of me. Whenever we're alone, she makes sure to give me a hard time. It's like she's protecting her son, Ken, fiercely. When we visit her, she gets visibly uncomfortable when Ken and I chat. But it's only when we're alone that she unloads her disapproval. She doesn't hold back, saying hurtful things about how I shouldn't be affectionate with Ken in her presence because I'm not family like she is. She goes as far as wishing Ken would divorce me. It's all so harsh that I'm left speechless every time. It's tough realizing my mother-in-law harbors such strong negative feelings toward me. I really want to build a good relationship with her, but this situation isn't helping. I've kept it from Ken, thinking it might make things worse. Looking back, I should have discussed it with him and created some distance from his mom early on. But I was so desperate for her approval. Things got even more complicated 6 months into our marriage when my mother-in-law started obsessing over grandchildren. It was like she couldn't let it go. One day, out of the blue, she said, "Willow, I think our family needs a boy as the heir." Everyone, including Ken, froze. Ken, bless him, stood up for me, telling his mom it wasn't okay to pressure us like that. He reminded her that having a child is a blessing, not a race, and our timeline is our own. Even though Kyle and his wife had a baby early in their marriage, it doesn't mean we have to follow the same path. He kindly asked his mom not to interfere too much. Despite my husband's efforts, my mother-in-law remained unimpressed. I chose to ignore her occasional icy glares. Kyle, Ken's brother, had tied the knot 5 years back, and soon after, his wife got pregnant, giving birth to a son, Billy, who's turning 4 soon. Billy adores being around us, and I can see him grow every time we meet. But what's remarkable is that Billy's words have been like a lifeline for me more than once. It all began when Billy was just 2.5 and started talking. One day, as I was about to leave my in-laws' place, Billy piped up, "Auntie, you should take a different road when you go home." Surprised, I asked him why. He replied, "The usual way isn't good. Take a different road." So I followed his advice that day. My husband had been drinking, so I had to drive. As I drove home, Billy's words echoed in my mind, leading me to take a different route. The next day, I was shaken to the core when the news reported a major accident on the exact road I was supposed to take the day before. I dropped the mug I was holding in shock. When I recounted my conversation with Billy to my husband, he dismissed it as mere coincidence. But Billy's comments continued to unsettle me. He never showcased his abilities in front of my husband or mother-in-law. It made me wonder if he possessed some kind of magical powers. One day, I decided to confide in my brother-in-law, Kyle. "Kyle, can we talk about Billy?" I asked, noticing a flicker of understanding in his expression. He took my arm and led me away from the others, speaking in a hushed tone. "What's going on with Billy?" he asked. "Well, maybe it's just a coincidence, but Billy has saved my life a couple of times," I confessed. "Saved you?" Kyle's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Yeah, from accidents and other situations. I was thinking maybe Billy has some kind of special power," I explained. "I see. So you've noticed it too," Kyle nodded. "He usually only shows that side of him to me and my wife. But I guess he revealed it to you as well." As time passed, I learned that Billy had displayed his special abilities to my brother-in-law and his wife on several occasions. They didn't think much of it, as Billy had never made such comments to anyone outside the family. However, they understood the potential complications if Billy's power became public knowledge. So they made efforts to keep it hidden. I couldn't shake off my curiosity about why Billy was revealing his power to me as well. It had been almost a year since I first discovered it. Recently, I found out that I was pregnant, but the morning sickness made it hard for me to visit my in-laws frequently. I heard that my brother-in-law and his wife were planning to visit, and while I was eager to see them, I also felt relieved that I wouldn't have to face my mother-in-law during the last trimester of my pregnancy. As my morning sickness settled down, my belly grew, making daily life a bit more challenging. Going on maternity leave should be a time of preparation and anticipation, but for me, it came with a barrage of calls from my mother-in-law. Every day, without fail, she'd ring me up, demanding to know if I was taking the supplements she sent. I was already taking folic acid, which I bought myself, but she insisted I switch to the expensive ones she recommended from a mail-order site. Her concern wasn't just about the supplements, it was about the gender of the baby. She made it clear that she expected a boy, considering me a failure as a wife for not delivering what she deemed a satisfactory child. Personally, I didn't care about the baby's gender. All I wanted was a healthy child. But my mother-in-law was fixated on having her way, right down to the gender. Dealing with her pressure was mentally exhausting. When I eventually told her the baby was a girl, she was furious. From then on, her harassment escalated. She insisted I take the supplements she sent, bombarded me with books on preparing for a second child, when I hadn't even given birth to the first one yet, and continued her daily calls. Her words turned increasingly cruel, filled with heartless abuse. She called me a worthless wife, regretted allowing us to marry, and even suggested I divorce her son. It was relentless and deeply hurtful. After giving birth, I found myself worn out both physically and mentally, haunted by my mother-in-law's hurtful words. I couldn't bring myself to tell my husband how much they were affecting me. I didn't want to burden him. But more than that, I feared any backlash from my mother-in-law. Despite the daily battles with anxiety, I managed to bring a healthy baby girl into the world. She was so precious that her presence overshadowed any negativity from my mother-in-law. 1 month later, my husband drove me to my in-laws' house to introduce them to our daughter. Alongside my brother-in-law, his wife, and Billy, I hope to see my father-in-law and reconnect with them after some time apart. As we approached their house, I felt a knot of apprehension. I dreaded facing my mother-in-law's words again, but more than fear, I was eager to reunite with the rest of the family. Yet, the closer we got, the harder it became for me to walk, anticipating what my mother-in-law might say this time. I couldn't shake off the worry about her potentially hurting my daughter as she grew older. That thought weighed heavily on my mind. Despite my reluctance, I made my way to my in-laws' house. Thankfully, it was my brother-in-law who greeted us, along with his family, who had arrived earlier. My mother-in-law was busy playing with Billy in the living room when she noticed us. Suddenly, my daughter started crying, seemingly out of nowhere. My husband was concerned, but my father-in-law tried to reassure us, chalking it up to the change in surroundings. I did my best to calm my daughter, but she wouldn't stop crying. My mother-in-law let out an irritated sigh and muttered, "This is why girls are trouble." In that moment, I felt a surge of anger like never before. No matter how much I loved her son, I couldn't forgive her for such a comment. Why did the baby's gender matter? She was safe and healthy. I resolved to endure the day and never return. Then Billy, who had been playing happily, suddenly spoke up. His words made me exchange a glance with my brother-in-law. Maybe he was using his power. When my brother-in-law casually asked why the baby was crying, Billy confidently responded, saying the baby felt sorry for me and wanted my mother-in-law to stop bullying me. My husband was taken aback, and everyone in the room turned to my mother-in-law, who seemed shaken and muttered something about Billy being strange. Billy boldly spoke up, revealing that Grandma had been mean to Auntie for a long time. Even when the baby was still in Auntie's belly, the baby didn't like it at all. My husband, taking it seriously, asked Billy if it was true. Billy confirmed it and said the baby wished she could tell Daddy, but he's too nice. She wanted Daddy to help Mommy. My husband thanked Billy, realizing the truth. He gave Billy a gentle smile before turning to his mother, his expression changing. He didn't care about her excuses and confronted her, demanding the truth. She denied it, trying to make me cover for her. But in that moment, I remembered all the times she had treated me poorly. It was time to speak up. I looked my husband in the eye and confessed that his mother had been bullying me since we got married. I knew it, but I was scared to tell him. My husband hugged me and our daughter, then turned to his mother with a resolve I'd never seen before. He called her out for her behavior, saying he was disappointed and didn't even see her as a mother anymore. He demanded she stay out of our lives. His mother pleaded, but my husband didn't buy it. He saw through her excuses, knowing she bullied me because I took him from her and because our baby wasn't a boy. He made it clear that he didn't want her involved with us anymore. It was a tough moment, but I knew it was necessary for our family's well-being. Why does it matter if our grandchild is a girl? I interjected, refusing to accept my mother-in-law's selfish desires. My husband, Ken, made it clear that he would choose me over her any day. He didn't want to continue a family with someone like her. My mother-in-law pleaded with Ken, begging him not to cut her out of his life. But he stood firm, looking at her with disdain. He reiterated that he was cutting ties with her, just as he had said. It was a heartbreaking moment, but necessary for our family's peace and well-being. In response to my husband's decision, my father-in-law and brother-in-law also chose to cut ties with my mother-in-law. My father-in-law even forced her to divorce him and leave the family home. With no money or place to go, she had to return to her parents' house. However, there, she was treated more like a housekeeper than a family member. It seemed like karma had caught up with her, and she was getting what she deserved. Meanwhile, we continued to visit my father-in-law and brother-in-law, maintaining good relationships with them and their families. Billy's magical abilities seemed to fade over time, and he rarely mentioned them anymore. Some say that babies and animals can sense things adults can't, but whether that's true or not, Billy's words had undoubtedly saved my life. Thanks to him, I'm now living a happy life. One day, I hope to share Billy's story, including his mysterious power, with my daughter. He played a significant role in our lives, and I want her to know about the extraordinary impact he had.